Our first story is called Spirit in the Driveway. It was a crisp autumn evening in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where nothing truly bad ever seemed to happen. 17-year-old Emma was babysitting for the Millers, a friendly family she'd known since childhood. Their two young children, Max and Abby, were easygoing and playful, and the parents promised to be home by midnight. After dinner and a few rounds of board games, Emma tucked the kids into bed, kissed their foreheads, and headed downstairs to relax with a book. Around 10 p.m., a sudden chill seemed to sweep through the house. Emma pulled her sweater tighter and chalked it up to the weather. But then, from the living room window, she noticed something odd. A figure standing motionless at the end of the driveway. It was hard to make out in the dim light, but Emma could see the silhouette of a tall person facing the house, unmoving. Her first instinct was to dismiss it. Maybe one of the neighbors was taking a late-night walk, or perhaps it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. But as the minutes stretched on, the figure didn't move. Emma tried to focus on her book, telling herself not to overreact, but every few moments she'd glance back at the window. The figure was still there, watching. Uneasy, she checked the locks on the doors and windows. They were all secure, and the kids were still fast asleep. Emma thought about calling the Millers, but she didn't want to worry them over nothing. Instead, she decided to keep an eye on the stranger and call if anything changed. Another half hour passed. The figure remained, shrouded in shadow. Then, without warning, the porch light flickered and went out. Heart pounding, Emma crept to the front door and peered through the peephole. The driveway was empty. Relieved, she stepped back, only to hear soft footsteps on the porch. She froze, barely breathing. The footsteps stopped. Then, a cold draft swept through the hallway, as if the door had been opened, though it remained firmly shut. Emma felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread. The room seemed to darken around her, and for a split second, she saw a pale face reflected in the glass of the door, a face that was not her own. She stumbled backward, heart racing, and grabbed her phone. Her hands shook as she dialed 911, but before she could press call, the lights flickered back on, and the coldness lifted. The house was silent once more. When the Millers returned, Emma told them everything. They listened with concern, but there was no sign of forced entry, no evidence anyone had been there. Still, Mrs. Miller paled when Emma described the face in the glass. She explained quietly that years ago, before they bought the house, a man had died in the driveway, hit by a car late one night. Ever since, there had been stories of a restless spirit appearing to those who stayed alone in the house. Emma never babysat for the Millers again, and she never forgot the feeling of being watched by something or someone from the darkness. Our second story is titled The Caller. When 17-year-old Lucas agreed to babysit for his neighbors, the Parkers, he expected an easy night. Their baby, Sophie, was usually asleep by 8, and the house was equipped with a baby monitor and security system. After Sophie settled down, Lucas grabbed his textbook and started to study at the kitchen table. Just after 9 p.m., the phone rang. Lucas answered, expecting it to be the Parkers checking in, but the line was silent. After a moment, he hung up. A few minutes later, the phone rang again. This time, a voice whispered, "Have you checked the baby?" Lucas felt a jolt of unease. He asked who was calling, but the line went dead. He quickly checked the monitor. Sophie was still sleeping. Everything looked fine. He told himself it was probably a prank call, but the calls didn't stop. Every 10 or 15 minutes, the phone would ring. Sometimes there was only silence. Other times, the same chilling question. "Have you checked the baby?" Lucas tried to ignore it, but fear crept in. He called the Parkers, who reassured him that no one else should be calling. They told him to keep the doors locked and call the police if anything seemed off. After the 5th call, Lucas decided to check on Sophie in person. As he crept upstairs, every floorboard seemed to groan louder than the last. He opened the nursery door slowly, his heart thundering in his chest. Sophie was still asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. He returned to the kitchen, but the phone rang once more. This time, the whisper was more urgent. "Why haven't you checked the baby?" Lucas slammed the phone down and called 911. The operator told him to stay calm and assured him that a patrol car was on its way. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as Lucas waited. He kept the baby monitor clutched in his hand, eyes darting between the front door and the windows. Finally, red and blue lights flashed outside. Lucas rushed to the door as the officers approached. He explained everything, and they swept through the house, checking every room and closet. There was no sign of an intruder. Then, one of the officers asked to see the phone. As Lucas handed it over, the phone rang again. The officer answered it, but this time, there was only static. Later, police traced the calls. They discovered they had been coming from another phone line inside the house, a line that hadn't been used in years, one connected to a small, unused room in the basement. When the officers checked the room, they found an old, dust-covered phone, its receiver still warm. Lucas never learned who made the calls, or how someone could have used that line, but the Parkers moved out soon after, and the house remained empty for years. Now for our third and final story, the lights. 15-year-old Grace was babysitting for the Martinez family on a stormy Friday night. Their two kids, Olivia and Ben, were energetic but easy to manage. Rain tapped steadily against the windows as the evening wore on. By 9 p.m., both children were asleep, and Grace settled onto the couch with her homework. The wind howled outside, and every now and then thunder rumbled in the distance. The house felt cozy, safe from the storm. Suddenly the lights flickered and went out, plunging the house into darkness. Grace fumbled for her phone and turned on the flashlight. She checked on the kids, still safe and sound, then returned to the living room, trying to calm her nerves. She called Mrs. Martinez, who told her the power sometimes went out during storms and not to worry. There were flashlights in the kitchen. Grace found the flashlight and returned to the living room, trying to focus on her homework. Minutes later, she heard footsteps upstairs. At first, she thought it was one of the kids, but when she checked, both were still asleep. Back in the living room, the footsteps came again, this time from the hallway behind her. She convinced herself it was the house settling, but the unease grew. Suddenly, the hall light flickered on, despite the power outage. Grace stared, frozen, as the light glowed for a moment, then faded out. A cold breeze swept through the room and the footsteps began again, growing louder. Grace called out, asking if anyone was there. No answer. The footsteps stopped. She tried to call Mrs. Martinez again, but her phone had no signal. The storm outside intensified, and the house creaked and groaned as if alive. The living room light flickered on, bathing the room in a ghostly glow. In the brief light, Grace saw a shadow move across the wall, tall and slender, with no discernible features. The lights flickered out. In the darkness, she heard the faint sound of whispering. Terrified, Grace gathered the children and locked them all in the master bedroom. She huddled with them, flashlight in hand, and waited for the Martinezes to return. When they finally arrived, the power returned as if by magic. Grace told them what happened, but nothing seemed out of place. The only evidence was a single, muddy footprint in the upstairs hallway, a footprint far too large for anyone in the house. To this day, Grace wonders if it was just the storm, just her imagination, or if something else had wandered in with the rain that night. These stories serve as chilling reminders that sometimes the things that go bump in the night aren't just products of our imagination. For those who babysit, every creak of the floor, every flicker of the lights, every unexpected phone call can become a moment frozen in fear. And though the night may end, some stories linger long after the children are safely tucked into bed and the parents return home.